What differences, if any, did you observe as a student and later professor in Canada and the cities you moved to in the northern United States regarding black and white race relations?
I knew no blacks in the North, so there's no comparison.
And what was your and your husband's motivations to accept a teaching position in the southern U.S.?
I think that one of the main reasons was that there was very little choice. I think we had one other opportunity that clearly was not as good, and by good I mean a place where we could make a difference in race relations.
Did you know about the existence of racial segregation in the South beforehand? What were your expectations of life there?
I couldn't really visualize what it would involve. I was aware of racial segregation, but I didn't know much about it. I didn't think much about it. I just was curious.
And what were your first impressions on your arrival in the South?
Well, people were friendly. Black people seemed deferential and hesitant to talk to us. I remember an instance of a student of mine pretty early after our stay in Little Rock, where I was walking downtown and I noticed that she kept falling behind, and I was wondering whether she had some kind of a handicap. And I asked her, and she said, well, she had never walked next to a white person.
And what were your first or most disturbing encounters with Jim Crow in the South?
It was just things that I observed. It wasn't things that were happening in our lives. I realized that the schools were obviously not as good as the white schools, that they were more crowded, and that the teachers were not as well prepared. The faculty at Philander Smith College, where we taught, were not as well trained as people as faculty in white schools. It was that kind of thing. There was a very authoritarian president whom I doubt that a white school would have put it up with. It was, I mean, he had to say, he had his fingers in every pie. There was no decision that was made that one was aware of without the president. And I don't think in a white school anything nearly like that would have been possible.
And how did you personally feel about suddenly not being part of an oppressed group, but being part of a privileged group within a system of racial segregation?
I was never part of a underprivileged group. In Czechoslovakia, there was no such thing, and in Canada there was no such thing. Yes, I felt that I was part of the more privileged group, but on the other hand, we were really pretty poor, and I didn't feel that our status was superior in any way. It was comparable to that of many of the whites in Little Rock.
And did you worry about raising your children in a racially segregated society?
Well, I thought that pretty soon these things would change and they would not be living in a segregated society. And I thought it was probably a good thing that they realized that they knew the bad times, because surely they weren't going to last.
And did you feel that gender discrimination was worse in the South than in the North?
No. I think a difference was made between women in the North and ladies in the South, but I don't think this was a matter of discrimination, but just of Southern culture.
And how did you feel about your husband's activism for the NAACP? Were you ever worried that his and your engagement in civil rights would disadvantage or endanger your family, especially your children?
I was proud of what he was doing. I was trying to participate as much as possible, and I probably should have worried about the children, but I did.
Were you ever directly criticized or threatened by white or black colleagues, neighbors, or other people during your involvement in the civil rights struggle?
Well, there was a neighbor and colleague, white, with a Christian church background, and I think he and his wife did not quite approve of what we were doing. They had not been doing anything like that, and they probably thought that it was useless to try, that things weren't going to change.
And when you and your husband decided to leave the South and settle in the North, was it primarily because of better job opportunities you received up there, or did you also feel more comfortable living in the North as opposed to the South?
Well, my husband thought about the job opportunities. I was willing to take whatever I could get in the North, and I always did. I think he not only thought about the better jobs, but also about the better libraries and the colleagues that he would meet, not necessarily at the same university, but in the same city. And I felt more comfortable in the South than in the North, particularly in Fayetteville.
Did the question of where better to raise your sons play a role in the decision to move north?
Would you repeat that?
Did the question of where to better raise your sons play a role in the decision to move north?
No.
And looking back at your long involvement in the struggle for racial justice and for more understanding between black and white Americans, what have been your most memorable positive experiences, and what have been the greatest disappointments?
Well, one positive experience were one kind of positive experience were the friends we made among white people. And first of all, there were the Elliots, who were Quakers, and their friends whose names I don't remember, who really accepted us, took us in. I remember them coming to our house and decided to make a mint julep, which I had not known before. They just did. And another thing was that they introduced us to now I can't think of the name, but to a beef roast that we had not known before, which was just great. They obviously were doing these things because they didn't think we could afford them ourselves. And and we did a lot of things with the Elliots. The other thing I thought that was very worth telling about is that we knew two women who were Baha'i, who were lesbians. Nobody seemed to have any problems with them being lesbians. They really took over and tried to help us both with the children and with furnishing the house and with doing, they just did an awful lot for us. And I'm sorry we lost contact with them.